6 a.m. This is the scheduled meeting. I know we attempted to try to meet 3 to 4 times a year if possible, and quarterly. So, of course, today's date is Tuesday, September 30th, 2014. We are on record, so you say. I do have some minutes from the April 9th meeting. We had originally had a meeting in March, I believe it was, and April. And I think Sherry has a copy of the flip chart handout. We'll pass that around so you can see where we were at that time. We're going to have the minutes here momentarily, but I will just kind of encapsulate or summarize real briefly that the reasons for having the subcommittee was born about in the last, I believe, Matanuska-Susitna Borough Anchorage Assembly meeting that we try to do every 6 months. And it was actually Matanuska-Susitna Borough's Assembly that actually brought this idea forward, is that we continue the dialogue that had started some 4 to 5 years ago, I believe, with a regional transit survey and a plan that was at least born about at that time by, do you remember the name of the company that was contracted for that?
For the transportation plan, I do not.
Okay, and it should be noted in the handout that Sherry has. So as a result of that, we met here in April, we met here in April, and we were devoted at that time to try and assist in, the 3 pages of notes. We were trying to make contact with the Alaska Railroad. Jim Kubitz was the contact person, and they were for various reasons, they were very interested, intrigued, and they actually wanted to. In fact, it was some of their dialogue in one of their board meetings that brought this whole ideation back to say, hey, can we put a commuter train between the Valley and Anchorage a couple of times each way, morning and afternoon? And of course, that brings about a lot of logistics after that. So Mr. Kubitz at that time stated, and again, not to quote exacts because he gave a rough estimate, that it would be in excess of $2 million a year that we would have to come up with funding-wise. When the discussion came about, we were looking at it, if the members recall that were here, we had about 6 months of the year that we were looking at trying to fund this year if we were to get a fall train started after the end of the summer passenger service, which would be about now, I would say, when we do it. And so we were looking at trying a way to come up with $1 million back in the spring before this fall. And the discussion at that time, at the last meeting, as I recall, is that seemed like a very fast pace to try to get $1 million from whatever sources we could get. We knew that the session was nearly ending. At that time in the state legislature, we didn't think we were able to, the message was we weren't going to get the funding there. We were looking at trying to engage stakeholders in the private enterprise communities. Some of the bigs we know downtown, of course, BP, ConocoPhillips. In Midtown, we were thinking Providence, South Central Foundation, the Alaska Native Health Consortium, because there's campuses, if you will. UAA has people that live in the valley and commute back. So we thought that, and then JBER, of course, and we thought that if we could get stakeholders to, basically, for lack of a better term, buy in and invest a little to see if this transit train might help ease some of the congestion on the roadways in the very near future would be a very good idea. I think everybody's at ease with that conceptually, but the issue was we were moving a bit fast. So
before we get too far, I need to clarify a few things, Paul. Thanks for, as far as the borough goes, I need to clarify procedural things for us.
Okay.
Our organization, different than municipality of Anchorage's assembly rules and regulations as a first-class city, we have to go back to these when we set meetings and agendas. That's pretty strict, and we don't get to make decisions as individual assembly members or stuff that you guys handle at your table. We have to go to the public for it. It's a bit of a different process and procedure. And for meetings like this, since I'm the only one here, Ron's in Seattle, having a quorum and I don't mind sitting here listening to the presentation, but is it an official meeting? Our clerk is very strict in announcing, so I'd like to have a discussion kind of what the procedures are to set those meeting dates. And we noticed it on our website and the like, but also the agenda events. So I'd like to, before we leave today, set the date for the next meeting, and I think more appropriately it sounds like this presentation needs to come in front of our entire assembly rather than just me and Ron kind of herding cats. I think there's major substance there as far as surveys and stuff, and probably more importantly is we need to set an entire full joint assembly meeting here in November to talk about legislative stuff. But it'll take, with our elections here in a couple weeks, the first Tuesday of October, and all of that certification process will be the 21st. Realistically, the first week of November would be a good time to, and adequate time to schedule that, but have it as an entire assembly and make transportation, and if we could do it in Eagle River, at least that would be great. But
Well, make no mistake, I appreciate, the explanation. I believed that at the call in our meeting in March in Matsu, that this subcommittee was just that, it's a subcommittee, and of course, the committee does not speak for the representative of the whole, and then anything we do legislatively in action would take a resolution ordinance voted on by the entire body. So that's not much different.
But for our, at least for borough policies, for subcommittees and staff meetings of the public, we're required to announce them 10 days in advance and all that stuff. I mean,
Didn't we, I think we had given information.
it was kind of out there, but the reality is,
So your guys' notice is 10 days, ours is 48 hours.
yeah, and
So that's good to know.
There's some differences, and I need to bring that to the table.
That's a good, no, it's good.
No, it's good to know.
It's,
Can we start with introductions? and-
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm Paul Holman, was nominated as chair.
Co-chair.
Co-chair with the,
Yeah.
co-chair for the Anchorage side.
Amy Domboski, Anchorage Assembly,
Steve Culligan, that's the Borough Assembly, Westfield.
and other co-chair.
And then the other member who's absent is Ron
Arden.
So if you wanna go ahead and just introduce yourself, I suppose we can grab it.
Sheriff Beasley and staff support for this committee.
Craig Lyon, I'm the Municipal Transportation Planning Manager.
Anchorage.
Bull Hassan, Superintendent of Operations, People Mover.
I'm Lance Wilbur, I'm the Director of Public Transportation at People Mover.
Christine Sunday, I'm the Public Transportation Planning Manager.
Fantastic.
Eleanor Harrington, I work for V-Ride and I've been as a sheriff program for this in Anchorage.
You're welcome to have a seat at the table, there's plenty of rooms, like, sit out in the dark.
It's comfy.
It's comfy. Okay.
And I'm Jennifer too with Ally Mover.
Very good. You can sit at the table too, if you want. Please. Okay,
I didn't say myself here.
Joe, please.
Eugene Haberman, I represent myself. I concur with Colton, concerning about the public process. And as you know, I follow the public process at these meetings, including the borough and Anchorage. Your past meetings have not followed the public process correctly. Some of these meetings were canceled because there was not appropriate notice, and the borough was resistant on that. Didn't want to do that because Anchorage wanted, you're doing 48 hours. Borough does not do 48 hours, and even the Assembly Rules Committee that happened about a week ago was less than 48 hours. Okay, so, and then the last point is, previous meetings, you've not been providing an opportunity for the public to be heard at public meetings, and as a really concern of mine, and the borough does not do that.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Haberman. Just for the record, subcommittee meetings and committee meetings are typically for the members to be educated, more informed. We generally invite subject matter experts and come in and talk to us about presentation. It's not generally a forum for the public to be heard. However, sometimes I know as a committee chair, I've often allowed public comments if there's time on the allowed time frame, or if there's something germane to the topic. And as far as notice goes, I believe, Sheriff, do you remember when we set the meeting date? It was in excess of 10 days ago, wasn't it? When we,
Yes.
I had to get the dates, but we did contact.
And I did tell her that she could schedule with me, or she scheduled through the clerk on the website, and the like, but,
I think we met the intent. I'm not sure if we met in 10 days, but I thought we did.
I think the borough did. I'm not sure that the municipality, you guys have different rules aren't the same for our organizations.
Sure.
And,
Okay,
all
well,
sorts of
we'll make sure
nonsense.
we meet the objectives of the law.
We have
when certainly
limitations
wanna
on
do
it.
it. Okay, and in no way, shape or form does this committee speak for the entirety of either the Anchorage Assembly or the Matanuska Borough Assembly. So, we will bring what our findings are, and of course, our suggested plan of action to the entirety of the body for either a resolution or ordinance. And, that's my belief, spirit of the reasoning for this subcommittee. So I believe we did a summary on item 2, so thank you, Mr. Voskis, for item 1 in their introductions. And we've identified participation between the municipality. And I'm sorry, you're with the Valley Mover, so that's Moki Two's, it's a private industry, nonprofit private
Yes.
company. Is
Yeah.
anyone here from the Matsu Transit other than yourself? Okay, we're good. So we have next Valley Mover, if you wanna, Jennifer?
Yes.
If you wanna, give us just an overview of your services and between the, Matsu and the Anchorage area, and, challenges and perhaps plans you might have for that.
Okay, we started about 4 years ago. Right now, we do 14 round trips into Anchorage and then an additional trip just to Eagle River. We started being a fixed route, all privately funded, within the valley and to Anchorage, but we got funded through the 5311 just to go to Anchorage, so we started doing that within the year that we started. Now, we give about 85,000 rides a year. We have about $1 million budget. Half of that comes through the 5311 grant, which is for rural transportation. The Matanuska Borough has a $1 million cap for that grant, so the remainder of it goes to Sunshine Transit and Talkeetna, Chickaloon, and Mascot.
So just to be clear, $1 million from the Matsu Borough is funding towards the.
5311 grant said federal, it passes through the state of Alaska, but the Matsu Borough is capped at $1 million. We will only get, our area will only get $1 million.
Are you at your cap currently?
The Matsu Borough is, we get about 500,000.
Okay.
Yeah. So that has to be matched. We get, no funding from the Matsu Borough, the government itself, but we have partnerships with UAA, the Matsu Borough School District. We just got a VA grant, and fairs is that's all, the remainder that we use to meet that $1 million budget.
Matsu Health Foundation.
We don't get operating budget from Matanuska Foundation. Currently, there was a mandate from the state of Alaska saying that we have to consolidate all 4 transit providers and that they will only give the 5311 grant to one organization. So we've been meeting, there's a consolidation committee. We meet every other week for 4 hours, and how we're going to consolidate into one organization. And we need to have a plan by the end of the year.
End of this year? And I'm sorry, who's that you're meeting with the?
The people on the consolidation committee, it is facilitated by Sharon Scott from the Matsu Health Foundation. There is all 4 transit providers of the valley on there. There is Rachel Greenford from the Palmer Senior Center, David, I forget his last name, there's a couple of human services representatives. Rosemary Bavron, who is a bus rider, is also on there.
And so that's a requirement for the funding to continue for that?
Yeah, only one person will be eligible to receive the 5311 grant in the Matsu Borough, yeah.
So that's a change in what has been in the past?
It's a huge change, yeah.
So if I can comment on that, so, in the borough, we have a huge geographic area, obviously, and, Valley Movers is probably the larger, more commercially, operator within the core area, but in the outer areas, Talkeetna, up into Sutton, the, Chickaloon area, they have their own, transportation things they've developed over time, and so, it's great to hear that in this regulation kind of forcing that discussion, but as an agency, it's always hard to figure out how to fund it, but Valley Movers is obviously some of the ski chalet areas and stuff, or they were contracted for a while, or something was going on there.
The mascot did that for the first
Mascot,
year, and
okay.
now the borough put it back out to bid, Valley Mover and mascot bid, but they decided they weren't gonna actually do it.
Okay.
So the borough canceled?
Yeah, and but anyway, our funding usually, like with the Matsu Health Foundation, we grant, for other services, the Matsu Health Foundation, and they go through the vetting process and then issue individual grants for different types of services and planning functions.
Does the Matsu Borough, have any taxpayer-based support funding towards, transit, regional transit? I'm saying, borough transit.
Property tax, everything we have is property tax, and that is kind of the issue that we're dealing with, until the port and the rail and other revenue sources come online.
How much, if you don't mind me asking, what's the budget?
Total budget, off the top of my head, I don't remember, but it's about,
Towards the transit.
our mills are, there's nothing, the transportation money and road service is all out of road service area money,
I see.
which is a mill rate set for each road service area, and we have no overall, road service area. There's not an area-wide road service area, it's each individual. We're talking about, we're coming up on how do we fund and maintain where the state on the, as growth happens, roads like Seward Meridian, that connect to the parks, et cetera, so those are developed, the state wants the borough to take over maintenance, et cetera, and trade. But, when they go through a particular road service area, that major collector, there's no mechanism other than that local road service area to pay for the maintenance of that when all sorts of road service areas collect and come on that major highway. So we are working through that right now.
I know in the municipality, we have a TORA, or Transfer Responsibility Act.
We have, like before, we have limitations under the form of government, us borough, of what we can or can't tax for. And, so as a first-class city, you guys have direct police and other things directly. Within the city limits, they have control over, police and their own taxes, but as the borough, we are, my personal opinion is we're at the edge of deciding how we transition into some other, management structure, and are living through the pain and benefits of
Mr.
the.
Mosky, have any questions?
I do. So my understanding then, the 4 providers that are out there now, it's the federal government's this time, you guys, we're only gonna give it to one person, so that's really what's forcing you guys to come together. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
No, there's not much we could do, I suppose, about that. I mean, to me, it kind of seems, are you guys creating a monopoly out there?
It's not us forcing
I know, but I mean,
consolidation.
I'm not you guys, I mean, is this what's essentially gonna happen? Do you have any concerns that this is gonna diminish your,
We have all sorts of concerns. But as far as, I think the, providers are coming together to meet the current intent of the law and the regulation.
Sure.
It has been the borough's intent all along to let the private sector kind of compete and us help coordinate some of those things.
Sure.
But yes, there are concerns about, this, but if it's done through an umbrella organization,
And it seems like most of them, from what I'm understanding, they're operating in different areas anyway, is that right?
Right.
they
Yeah.
each have their geographic focus and also, so there's some that are senior, kind of transportation focused, but, the, one up in Sutton Chickland, they have they're not competing with each other.
Mhm.
And the areas are so broad and the ridership is so different, trying to have one business model, I think if you talk to the vendors, is difficult to handle the entire borough, so.
It's a big area. Yes.
Jennifer, if you don't mind,
Yeah, go ahead.
follow up on that, do you envision the umbrella as was indicated where the other providers out in Chickland, say, would submit a request for the grant through whomever gets, I guess, is.
Well, that's what, is being discussed at those meetings right now. We're not really sure what the purpose of it is to lower the cost of administrative cost, and so we're able to get more rides. There are definitely some areas that are broken, but most places have that local government
so personal opinion, I don't see the umbrella organization saving any administrative cost.
Right.
In this case, it's a regulation that's made for some other size community, and, it's actually, they're morphing to be able to meet the intent of the funds, but it's not saving any administrative overhead.
It's creating another step.
The borough is not getting into the transportation business at this point.
If I might add, just if you could keep us posted if there's anything that we can say or do, that would assist, if you will, the business model is all we really want. I think everybody wants good, convenient, affordable ridership.
And we do have, the consolidation committee, presents at the Matsu Transit Coalition every other month, and those are open, so you guys are welcome to come to those too, so I can forward you the information.
That would be great if you
Yeah,
could.
if you let us know.
I always like seeing it, what other people are doing, because it, I mean, gives opportunity for us to improve what we're doing, or, you know, maybe it'll spur a new idea. You know, and this is probably isn't the place to talk about it, but, at this time, but, I would like, maybe on our next agenda, to start picking the Valley delegation's brain about what they might be doing with Uber.
Very good. Good? Now,
Yeah, unless there's any other
if
questions.
you think of anything, we'll loop back to you.
Okay.
Mr. Boston?
Good.
More add?
So in a comment, my concern about the consolidation is, there's not enough money to obviously meet all the needs, so there's an ongoing arm wrestling battle, and everybody's usually unhappy at the end of the process. They have enough to barely survive and the like. You know, the thought that you can reduce administration is forced consolidation of government services might be one thing. In this case, it's forced consolidation of other independent services. Maybe not the best thing.
Thank you, Ms. Coleman, appreciate it. Okay, so we have next the Regional Household Travel Survey, an overview, if you will, for the Anchorage Transportation Plan.
Okay, so, we're the federally required planning organization here to help figure out how to spend the surface transportation dollars inside basically the Anchorage area. And our main plans that we do a 20-year long-range plan, and we do a 4-year shorter range plan. And the 20-year plan looks at all of the different possible road projects, transit projects, trail projects, et cetera, that any source of funds that we might be able to track down in the Anchorage area can be used on. So that would include the federal funds, state grants, state geo bonds. If earmarks were to rear their head again, it would include those, and it also includes municipal bonds. And it's just a planning tool to look at all the kind of things we do in the next 20, 25 years to make sure that, you know, we deal with the traveling public in terms of not getting more congestion and not having worse air quality and all that sort of stuff. And one of the ways we do that for our long-range plan, which is called the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, or MTP, is we use a travel model. And we plug in numbers, and, you know, there are all sorts of details that go into it that I frankly don't really understand, but I have a professional modeler who does that, and so she tells me here it is, et cetera, and so we plug in numbers, and then we can look out 20 years and say, okay, Lake Otis and Tudor right now is functioning at this level of service, the cars can get through in this period of time, what's it gonna look like in 20 years? And the model allows us to get an idea of that. One of the main things that we plug into it is the population and the travel patterns. And so in 2001-2002 timeframe, we did a travel survey, and we used it to feed our model, and we used it to spit out results to say, here are the kind of things that we need to do, and maybe they include the Dowling extension or Martin Luther King Drive or all that sort of stuff. We are in the process of doing a new travel survey. We do them every 10 years to kind of align with the census, so that's why we don't do them more often. And so what we've done this time is we've sent a lot of survey requests. It's a random generated survey request, but it goes out to a lot of people who live in the valley, because obviously we have a lot of commuters coming in. Some of them come in via the bus, but some of them come in their own cars. A lot of them come in share ride vans and things of that nature. And And so, we've sent out this random survey, and we're looking to get information back, from folks to say where they're starting from, where they're going, how many people they're traveling with, where their trips during the day, how long did it take, and all that sort of stuff, so we can get the information into the people that know how to do that sort of thing and feed it back into our model. So we've sent out a bunch of survey postcards like that. Sure. And they come with a specific password for that person, so it's locked into their user. In other words, so my information that I fed into it includes how I drove, how my son drove, how my wife drove, where the kids went, did they ride with me, did they ride with my wife, et cetera, et cetera. And anyone who's in the household is supposed to fill this creature out and use it to help us program our model. And so it's happening right now. It's going through the 24th of October. Everyone has a specific travel day. You get one travel day, and then you're supposed to go there and fill out all the stuff online. And you can do it over the phone too, but online is a pretty darn easy way to do it. It probably takes about 15-20 minutes for you to fill in your information, depending on how many drivers you have in the house and how many trips you took. So we're really looking forward to as large a response as we can get. If we get a 2% response rate, it says something based, instead of a 10% response rate. So we did a pilot survey in the spring, or actually early summer, I guess, and we got about a 6% response rate, which was really double what we were expecting, so it was great. So if we get something like that, that'd be great.
That's sad. 6% is great.
Well,
But
it's
for
twice what we were
For
expecting.
surveys, I can understand it.
Yeah, and you think of all the other things that are happening right now. I mean, we sent that out in the summer, and so, there's some fish are running in some streams somewhere that, we had a lot of trips down to the Kenai, that people talked about. In summer in Alaska, maybe people aren't driving as much, maybe people just, that might be a political survey, I don't want to respond to that, that sort of stuff, all sorts of factors, who knows?
Can I follow up?
Yes, please.
So the one that you sent out earlier, in the summer, was that one I see has linked a potential where you get a $10 gift card?
Same thing.
Was there an incentive in this? There was?
Yeah, same thing.
And I'm assuming, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, all I was just gonna add was that, we will increase the amount of that reward if you have a really large family, or if one of the things we're trying to do is oversample areas that are, either lower population or minority, or places that we don't usually get survey responses from. So if you're responding from one of those areas, I think it's a $20 gift card instead of a $10 gift card, so. Just for more information.
So, specifically to the Mat-Su, did you poll people in the Mat-Su, or it's a Anchorage survey that includes transportation issues to the Mat-Su?
So we contracted with a group who's based out of Salt Lake City, I think, and what they used is the Postal Service's address database to send out, and then they are sampling places in the valley. I don't know exactly how, but they are sampling, using the address database to get a certain percentage of the valley, as opposed to the amount that we do in Anchorage. But yeah, it's a random survey out there, random sample out there. And there is a way for people to volunteer for the survey. So if you went to that regional travel survey website and said, hey, I didn't get picked, but I sure would like to do it, I'd like to offer my information, you can do that too. I'm not positive, but I think if you volunteer for it, you can't get the $10. So, sorry.
Thank you.
If I might follow up, Ms. Easley, you're a Mat-Su resident. By chance, have you been randomly selected?
Not yet.
Get through the 24th of October.
You can volunteer though.
Yes, but then I wouldn't get a certificate.
And my question, I guess, to follow up that, and would there be an opportunity for either a poster size or something to be posted on perhaps the Valley Mover, so that they could look at least at ridership, because that gives you it's a segment of people already taking some form of transit. Is that acceptable, or is this
Well, yeah, we can,
supposed to be random?
well, no, again, it's, the majority of it is random.
Sure.
So that way we can, random in that, we wanna pick some representative locations in both areas, but we do have the opportunity for people to volunteer, so that's.
I don't know what
I'm
kind of
sure we
cost
could-
that is that would, you know,
Poster can't be that much.
how many buses do you do?
We do 5 a day.
5 buses coming in? I imagine, even if we doubled up the posters, it's 10 posters.
So, one comment I have, as well as resources at the borough, our public relations department, Patty Sullivan and Stephanie Hinman do a great job, and we have actually quite a few, folks on Facebook that electronically deal with the borough, and there's also, Map Valley News. It's kind of incredible. I think they have more than 10,000 folks that they send out text messages and posts from Facebook or through their website of just kind of things happening for the day. And it's actually pretty responsive as well as the frontiersman, but the electronic stuff is fairly viral. So when it's time to publish or from the drives, it's no cost, and
Yeah.
you just email them the link, and it's amazing how many more
If
people.
that's acceptable, could we ask it that be done? Maybe we can
Absolutely.
either send it to one of us or
Yeah.
the clerk's office.
Yeah.
And I think the clerk's office has a pretty good Facebook and,
I push it all the time online.
But,
through our community councils, even as a federation community council notification, I could probably put that out.
Can I just follow up?
Yes, please, Mr. Moss.
So, obviously, this travel survey will help us plan for the future. Two of my, most important things that I'm focusing on, I forgot one of them already, but the second, sorry, the second one that I was thinking of is, obviously, there's a large population of people that are coming in from Eagle River and the valley into Anchorage. And what we recognize, what I think I recognize, is the deficiency of, they get to Anchorage, but the spokes, how quickly they can rapidly get to one point to another. And we've heard anecdotally stories of people who say it takes them an extra, hour and 15 minutes because the connections in Anchorage aren't as smooth maybe as some cities that we've seen. Now, obviously we recognize we don't have the same transportation system as New York City, right? It's not rapid transit in that regard, but, so that's something that as a transportation committee starts moving forward and we start talking about other ways to bring people in from the valley, we have to make it accessible, easy for people to get, once they get to Anchorage, get where they're going. And whether that's a combination of, private entities doing it or changing some of our routes, that's something that I'm watching for and I don't know the answer to, but I'm sure you guys are too. And the second being, in my mind, one of the big elephants in the room is are we really gonna move the transit center? Are we moving it to Midtown? And if, yeah, Craig, you just look the other way.
That's that guy's.
You look the other way. So, and if we're gonna improve our transportation model being, the spoke and the wheel and all that, that's gonna play a huge factor in what happens with these people coming into Anchorage. So, I don't expect an answer or solution right at this moment because it's all changing, it's all dynamic. But those are the two big issues that I see is connectivity and central hub and how do we get people faster to places. And like I said, I had mentioned Uber earlier, but there might be opportunities for private entities to help and assist in this endeavor. And maybe it is about changing routes, I don't know. But I think it's probably all on the table.
Two quick answers to that, and I'll let Lance talk about the transit center if he so desires. So in the last, I've been here since 2003, and over that period of time, I think we've added 4 or 5 new roads, new pieces of roadway through areas that had not ever had them before. A lot of the things that we do in transportation planning and in AMATS is we rehabilitate roads, or we might reconstruct them, make a 2-lane, a 3-lane, or something like that. But in the last decade or so, under these 3 mayors that I've served under, we have added Dowling East, Dowling West, Elmore, 40th Avenue, Martin Luther King. So we've added a lot more connections, and that's one of the things we look at. I mean, the Federal Highway Administration really presses, or has been pressing lately, the idea of system preservation, preserving what you got before you build any new things. Now, obviously Elmore was a state geo bond, so there weren't federal funds involved in that. And 40th was as well, and was Martin Luther King? So Martin Luther King was a state grant as well. So the state has stepped up and done a number of new pieces of roadway as well. So even though the feds are saying concentrate on making sure what you have is preserved, we at the state level, or the state has gone in and added some new connections. I'm hopeful that will continue, because you're right, they come into town, it's like, well, now we've got another 45 minutes trying to get across town or whatever. Certainly, rush hour doesn't last too long, but it does exist there. So that has been a strong component of what we've been doing, is continuing to add those new connections that are necessary to make sure that our congestion doesn't get bad. I mean, the reality is congestion lasts for about 25 minutes, maybe half an hour, depending on where you are. You think of Seattle and you get there, it doesn't matter what time of day, and it's congested on I-5. So, but we continue to stay on top of that, and we'll continue to do that, so.
Yeah, so just to comment on that, I know I've said it before, but some new faces will rediscuss it. To me, the biggest Alaska transportation study that was ever done was sequestration. So myself driving in from the Matsu to South Anchorage more than several times a week, where my office is. When sequestration happened, the amount of federal employees, it was clear, that were on the road or going maybe to some of the base jobs stuff, it was 75% of the traffic was gone on the Glen Highway. When sequestration aligned with the state holiday, it was a ghost town. And so looking at, important to me, so we, from our end of the transportation perspective, there's the commuters on the Glen Highway, and yeah, even if we had a rail extension or a rail trip, it might take a little longer logistics, whereas 99% of the time the buses or in your car, you're passing up the rail. But on those 5 days a year when it's freezing rain and you're sitting in a big 4-hour parking lot on the Glen Highway, you wish you were on the train, but how do you manage the costs and contingencies versus local transportation within the valley? But for us, one of the major things trying to figure out where those profile of users are that would really benefit from that transportation, that would remove that individual traffic off the Glen, but the major employers are coming to downtown or to BP or to, and how do we target or market or target the convenience of those, whether it's a bus or whatever the service is. The other ones are a lot harder, random, and and I wouldn't say fortunate, but when sequestration happened, it was astounding to me what an effect that actually had on transportation, because I still was private sector, still drove in, and I didn't anticipate it, that happening. That's really big deal. So, but to me, it says that, and so we're looking at, and then also how many of those employers downtown could have satellite offices in the valley. But for each one of those you keep off the road is millions and millions of dollars we don't have to put in that infrastructure that could go somewhere else, because we don't have money for all of the infrastructure. And there's a large military, so you're talking a train, if you're gonna, whatever, you have to stop at the base, how to handle security, how many does that equate to in ridership, et cetera. There's many advantages of flexibility of the bus service, and Uber, I know people complain about it, but on the other hand, that's total randomness of flexibility.
No, I mean, I think Steve brings up a good point. I say no, but then I start talking. Steve brings up a good point. I mean, sometimes we have to amend our model and start thinking, rather than specific, we wanna go from this street to this street, maybe we need to start looking at routes where are the biggest employers in town and potential people traveling. So maybe there is a route that should stop at Providence Hospital at BP and, the university, I don't know.
Health and Human Services in Midtown is a large employer. There's several, I know people that ride in it still have to crawl through several blocks of snowbanks at certain times.
So playing off of that, maybe some of the survey, some of the targeted people that we're asking these questions to, rather than just looking for ridership, would be big employers. And and saying, okay, within your organization, how many people take the bus? How many people commute from the valley? I mean, that would be a way, especially anecdotally, what you're saying about seeing how many people were not on the roads during sequestration or a state holiday. I mean, that would make sense.
Well, to us, I'll just be honest with you, the biggest success, these rideshare vans, in addition to the Valley Mover they're already using those services. They've figured that out, and those are the same kind of market customers. But if you could expand that, where are those employers? And most of the ones I know are state workers. They kind of coordinate that themselves. But is there room to expand or augment that, or figure out how to coordinate the Valley Mover services to on both ends? On the rail side, we have concerns of convenience of getting to it and having adequate parking on the valley side. What do you do when you travel through base and you want people to get on and off for security? Then when they get to downtown or wherever that rail is, how do they get to where they're at? From my personal perspective, it's total randomness as far as when and how I commute, so I just avoid or stay at home certain weather. And it's not structured enough for me to get any benefit at the moment.
All right, I think we'll move into then, number 5 on the agenda, and that's with Lance Wilbur and Company. Reference to people mover bus service and connections, and of course, the different both concerns and proposed. I see you brought some props and some people.
So, the reason that both Abul and Christine and Eleanor was able to join us this week, there's a statewide transit conference going on in the Millennium. So anybody that's in the transit business, big and small, urban or rural, we're all in one hotel, and Jennifer was there as well. So that's why kind of got us all here. Otherwise, I would have come solo without my posse. So, but I think if you have any questions, you can ask them. I tell you guys, there is so much going on in public transportation, not only in Anchorage but across the state. It's good, and it's just a lot of really good stuff going on. You know, the consolidated plan that Jennifer and Valley Mover and others are having to deal with. I mean, we've had to deal with that, and other people have to, and I think Steve's got it right. I mean, it's a challenge to actually do that, but when you hold the gold, what they're trying to do is make sure that they're not repetitive services and they're not redundant services for the same pot of gold. They challenge us the same way. The money that the Valley Mover gets allows them to come into Anchorage. Likewise, the amount of money, the kind of money that we get from FTA is different. It does not allow us to go to the Matsu. So, because the constraints of the gold allow them to provide that service, the same amount, the color of the money that we use does not allow us to go the other way. So it's more of an urban type of a service. So one of the things that we are doing, I'm going to talk about the kind of the relationship between Valley Mover and People Mover second, but maybe to follow up on Craig's, this regional household survey, it's going to also ask questions about people's travel habits. It's also going to ask them questions about transit, people that don't ride the bus. You know, why don't you ride the bus? Where does it go to? How come? Because they're going to ask you, if it was here, would you ride it? So we're going to get a lot of transit information from that regional survey that's going to be here in Anchorage, Eagle River, and the Valley, that really Craig's going to be using to create a regional model. I mean, that's how we have to start thinking. 10 years ago, it was Anchorage, Bowl, and Eagle River, and then the Matsu did their plan. But based on how the roadways are getting connected, as Craig mentioned, not only in Anchorage, but the connections between our regions, buses drive on those roads too. And so, in concert with that regional household survey, that's a phone survey, people will be asking questions about transit. And so we'll gain a lot of information from our business that we can use in the model. But complementary, we are doing, same contractor, at the same time, an onboard bus survey. So it's literally surveyors on the bus with a tablet. We're asking people their trip purpose, where they're coming from, where they're going to, what's the purpose of their trip, how many transfers do they have to make, how many days of the week do they ride, and we're going to ask them a lot of different questions that's going to help us get to, I think, the question that Amy raises: are there changes to be made? I mean, what are those changes? Are the routes adequate? Christine and Abul, mostly in Christine's group, we keep a tremendous amount of information. We know a lot about the people people that ride the bus. It's just not a face or a hat on the bus. We know how many people are getting on at every single one of our 1,100 bus stops. We know how many are getting off. We know the time of the day of the week. We know a lot of information. We work with employers, mostly on the share a ride side of our program, but also to help promote the benefits of public transportation for their employees. But we also try to educate them that, really public transportation is an investment for us, and it's not a social service. As a director, I never promote public transportation as a social service. That's not what it is. And I think historically people viewed us, we're like a utility for all intents and purposes. For many people, that's their only means to get from one place to another. So a lot of things going on, a lot of things happening in a coordinated fashion, both for data and for service. So I think the issue with the Midtown and how we will regroup, similar to the roadway network that we have, and the Matsu Borough is experiencing it in tenfold, and that's the amount of growth they have, and how do you keep up with all of those other services. Anchorage is the same way. Our hub's been downtown for 40 years. We've grown so much in east, so much to the south, and we're not slowing down in either direction. And downtown's not going away. So is the hub of Anchorage, because if you want to, the way our service is created was really kind of established or redefined in 2000 and basically, the early 2000s, between 2003, 2006 or 7, where we created a hub spoke on demand. Because when we run a bus, a bus that will leave the Takatnu will go through Tudor, Muldoon, and get to, let's say, downtown. It's not, that bus driver doesn't turn around and drive the other direction. It's not, we run our buses, I think, as Jennifer would too, we run it by the minute. And we pay our drivers by the minute. And everything is literally just-in-time delivery. So we have 52 buses in the middle of in the peak hour, we're running 44 to 43. And everybody has to be at the right place at the right time with a little minute amount of layover so that you can put as much service on the street with the money that you have. So we run out of, I'm gonna just use the maps here if you're not familiar. So we run 14 bus routes, one bus route out to, we run 7 days a week. We run from 5:30 in the morning to literally 10:30 at night. Monday through Friday, it's that time frame. We run on the weekends, and we run Saturday and Sunday. We have less service on Saturdays and Sundays. But the way we operate is, people live here, and they work here and here, or they live out here, and then many people work here. So everybody's going this way in the morning, just like they're driving with their cars, and they go the complete opposite. So we have hubs at the Diamond Center transfers, one out at Muldoon, one in the University UMed area, and one in downtown. In the current long-range transportation plan that we have, goes out to 2035, when we look at the assumptions for land use and these new roadway networks that Craig mentioned, these hubs, the one at Diamond Center, we're gonna have to do some improvements because it's really getting overcrowded. Muldoon, out on Muldoon Road, it's really at capacity. Downtown is more. I'm literally running out of space downtown to put buses in order to make all those switches, but these buses transfer at these locations and then you switch and then you go to a different route. So that's literally how our service works. But since 2009, when we did that refinement, it was based on some survey information, this onboard survey, where people go to. This onboard survey that we are completing right now is gonna help us with some additional information about how the information we get from the regional travel, the household survey will tell us that as well. These new road connections, honestly, a road through the university is gonna help us get in and out of there so much quicker than going through UAA Drive. Dowling Road, a connection from Midtown to the airport, is different than Tudor. We have some opportunity there. The development on C Street over the last 5 years, if that retail outlet mall goes to the south end next to Cabela's, we used to have a route on the C Street, but there just was no productivity there. So in the next probably 3 years, we will be seeing some changes and some recommendations that will come from the department to the administration to the assembly on some modifications to the network. Additionally, we have service right now where we keep track of it, and where we did have good service or we had good ridership, it's not there anymore. People move, or maybe somebody, maybe an institution moves in, and we might get a location where there's more folks in wheelchairs, more folks riding bikes. All of that stuff's, you know, it modifies the time it takes to get from one end to the other. Pretty much all of our buses run from one end of town on either a 30-minute headway or 1 hour. So, Amy, when they come into town, you know, if their connection is on that 1 hour route, and they got there, you know, 15 after, they gotta wait for 45 minutes for their next run to do. If it comes in on, half hours, then it would be, you know, 30 minutes. And a lot of people don't know, because a lot of people don't use, public transportation here in town, but you can get from downtown to the airport, downtown to any hospital in 20 minutes. And you can't drive and park in 20 minutes, but you just don't know that. You can get to the airport in less than 20 minutes. You can get to Diamond Center in about less than 30 minutes. So, honestly, if you ever leave downtown and you drive down Arctic to get to the Diamond Center, you drive Spinard Road and you follow a bus, you're gonna be driving the speed limit and get there at the same time, and they're gonna drop you right off. Same thing if you take Valley Road. If you're at Trunk Road, or if you're at, you know, some Stewart Meridian, or wherever you're getting on, you can follow the bus in, and you're gonna get there at the same time, but it's the connection. So our future is looking at that growth that we have. The center of town is not in downtown anymore. It's in the middle of Anchorage. And so, and that decision should not be made lightly. I mean, the location, it's not determined. I mean, there's some great opportunities, some good sites, but we would like to make it with a different type of a development than a utilitarian brick bus stop. I mean, it ought to be mixed use. It ought to have some accommodations to it where people, so if they are coming in and they have some time to stay or wait, they have those opportunities to do that. Our bus stops downtown, either at downtown bus stop, we're gonna continue to service. Conoco's a huge user of our bus service. They also use some, I mean, so we have a UPass program with Conoco. They have a benefit with their employees, and we have that program with UAA. We also are doing something unique this year with East High School. Maybe you've heard about that. So again, there's so much going on, a lot of good stuff. We have so much technology. We have a trip planner that we didn't have a couple years ago, 6 months ago. And then Uber's in town, you know. So people are kind of freaking out, but you know, it is what it is. I mean, if I'm in town and I wanna get to the valley and I see that the bus isn't there, or the cab ride's $120, Steve's on Uber, he's in South Anchorage, hey, my plane's here, can you give me a ride? I pay him $40 or $60, whatever the rate is, and I'm riding in Steve's car. So it's not for everybody, you know, it's not for everybody. So there's a lot of good information sharing. As far as it relates to Valley Mover, when I became director, one of the things that they had a challenge with is that people coming in, but they didn't have a place in the downtown to stop. So we made an accommodation for them across the street from there, made an accommodation for them at the museum. It's kind of a slippery slope. It's because they're literally they're a private nonprofit. In my mind, they're really not that much different than the Ulu factory or the zoo. I mean, why does Valley Mover get their own special bus stop when the Ulu doesn't, or the trolleys don't? And at some point, they start getting into the bus stops, and then we show up and we can't get there. So they kind of have a reserved special spot for them. So, and made the accommodation because they're a public transit agency bringing folks in. So they've had other requests to, you know, for some other bus stops, and I think, and I mentioned it to Robbie with Valley Mover, that we probably need to revisit again and find out what they're, because they are growing. I mean, I look at the buses, and when they're coming this way in the morning, going that way at night, they're full. I mean, they're packed. So
I see them every day.
and honestly, when we look at our own service, we are constrained. I mean, we have some budget constraints. The service to Eagle River, we run empty all the way out to Peters Creek in the morning, and however many times we do that. And then the service coming in, you know, we're able to come in on the Old Glen Highway. Maybe there's an arrangement that we make where they help pick up those people that are right next to the Glen Highway if the federal money will allow them to do it. But that's a business decision for them as well as it's for us, because it's lost revenue for us, but what's the cost for the amount of people? And if they're going right by and they have, but right now their buses are full, or they can pick them up, they come into Eagle River. We would take those resources. We have no internal service inside Eagle River. There's I mean, if you wanna go from Business Boulevard to Walmart, from revenues, 20% from grants. So, my ridership is down a little bit, my revenue's down a little bit, so I have to manage all of those things, and we look at, where are we providing service that we've been providing it for 5, 6, 7 years, and the ridership isn't there anymore. We might pick up 1 or 2 people. We trim that stuff off, and where we are providing service on our main lines, our main arterials, where we're there every hour, we could be there every half an hour. So, I mean, it's a philosophy. We drive through neighborhoods all over the place. It takes us a lot of time to do that, and we put ourselves at risk. The good news is we're really close to the customer. The bad news is we're not picking up very many customers. So we look at all of those things to refine, and so I think as kind of a sneak peek for Paul and Amy, when we bring the budget forward, if we're gonna be some reductions and we're gonna be reducing service, those are the kinds of refinements that we're making. Now, we're not making, we're gonna go in with our knee clear, but we are gonna have to make some adjustments if we are, and honestly, even if we don't have a budget reduction, every year we look at refining our service. Because the demand's changing, the locations are changing, and so, I think that's pretty much everything on your.
Mr. Boss has a question.
Well, I just appreciate, as these refinements happen, that, you're willing to partner with people like the Valley Mover. Because I think we have to recognize with diminishing both federal, state, and city dollars, we have to, allow the private sector, into our territory, so to speak. I mean, we have to. We have to be cognizant of the changes. When you talk about Eagle River, I'm sure you've seen the very large, senior housing and all those high-density housing that's happening in downtown Eagle River, so it's gonna be a problem. And I can tell you from personal experience, being an Eagle River person, I have heard nothing but for the last 5 years about complaints about not being able to get around in Eagle River, hence why the Uber discussion is becoming so hot in my community. It's because there is no opportunity for public transit. I mean, you can come into Anchorage, and the Valley Mover stops in Eagle River. So between the two, you can get into Anchorage, but you can't get around at all, and it's a very large community. I mean, it's becoming that way, and it's only gonna become worse with the high-density housing that's going in right down in Eagle River. So it's something, I think, if there's, creative ways that we can partner and make allowances for others to come in and help us, satisfy the market need, I'm totally for that. But we also have to continually be reevaluating the services that we're providing, because I live in Peters Creek. I know exactly what bus stop you're talking about, because it's about 4 miles from my house, closest bus stop. And sometimes in the winter, I'll see one person standing out waiting for it, but many times I drive past it and it's empty. But the same gentleman, I know he takes the bus every day because I see him there, so.
So, I mean, it's those difficult choices where we're picking up 1 or 2 people and we're driving, we spend 40 minutes going one way in an empty bus to pick up 1 person, and then we kind of snake our way back. Maybe it might not be worth Valley Movers, but it's certainly worth the conversation.
Oh, absolutely.
So I think, and Robbie has asked me a couple other questions, primarily stops on the Glen Highway, and, I've talked with them about, a stop at the VA. I told them I would help them work with the state to pull off at the VA if they wanted to do that, because there's a lot of folks in the valley who take the bus and they're looking to that VA, and it's literally an interchange off. We provide that service. So, on the other hand, from a stingy business sort of perspective, I think we can work together. But when Valley Mover is inside Anchorage and they're picking up people downtown and then taking them to UMed, or they're taking them to the Diamond Center, there's my lost customers. But honestly, they're doing it because it's convenient for them, and I'm not providing the service that they need. But honestly, I look at it as a hospitality business, not a social service. And if we can't do it, someone else can, and someone's getting the ride they need, whether it's to work or to school. That's what it's all about. That's literally all it's about.
Can I make a comment? When we ask for new stops, it's never to provide transit from downtown for Anchorage people to another place. It's always to bring the Matanuska Borough residents to a place that they need.
Is there, handicap service at all?
Yeah, all of our buses have the ramps on them.
Well, you brought up many good comments, and my comment is we're here talking about this form of transportation today, but as far as the borough and other stuff, we were having to get a more holistic look about our entire transportation planning process. And in the future, I think we'd be looking to the municipality to engage DOT to go away from their green book design to more like a context-sensitive design, looking at land use and stuff. We are in the borough overbuilding way into the future transportation corridors when and based on certain assumptions that get magnified through the different process or margins of error, build these huge corridors and right-of-ways that take away all the other money for other connected roads and transit opportunities. Bus service is another element of that keeps that traffic off that could prolong the necessity for that huge highway for many years into the future if we can just come up with some system. And the business, I hate to hear government and business, but on the other hand, looking, rather than trying to please everybody, figuring out that niche opportunity. I know Valley Movers can be looking at where are those centers of population? Who are the types of employees that have a 8 to 5 job, consistent where they could ride the bus? For me, my schedule's never like that, and it's almost impossible to get those stars to align. But where is that sweet spot? How can we start there and get those people incentivized? At the end of the day, I wonder what's the overhead of the bus system versus these moving vans, which are very successful for certain employers. But on the major employers that are working with you in the city, what is that in the Matsu? Are those ConocoPhillips looking at the employees in the Matsu? And I just know on the state employment and the federal employers, is there things in place? Because I think there's a lot of folks driving in from the valley, military, federal employees, state employees, and folks that work at the hospital. And those are the low-hanging fruit, sweet spot profiled customers that both Valley Mover and you guys can benefit from it.
I mean, I think, so there's a couple considerations. I don't think anybody in the bus business or anybody that drives a car every day, I think now they're starting to look at options. I'm not trying to tell somebody to put their car keys away and sell their car, but provide a service that, if they took a bus 1 day a week out of the 5, they would save 20% of their travel costs in a year. I mean, an average house spends $10,000 a year, and it's more here.
And
So-
that aggregates up to how many rides on the road
Right.
through the bus service, through the share a ride, that means we don't have to add the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th lane, et cetera.
And we've been successful, and I think, I'll give DOT some credit here. When the long-range transportation is looked at, particularly on the Glen Highway, the lane expansion is meant to be an HOV. It's not meant to be single occupancy vehicle, which would give us bus rapid transit opportunities on the Glen Highway or carpooling or share ride, and they would be able to advance on the facility even more. And one of the things this reminded me of, the opportunity costs lost if you don't have the ability to kind of act in a relative good time frame. The important thing about Midtown is, as an example, in our long-range transportation plan, we recognize that the transit core connection between downtown, Midtown, and UMET is strong. Our first bus rapid transit that we have planned will be in that L shape. And then the next one will be the connection between here and Eagle River, just because of when we think the demand is gonna occur. So building those facilities that they might be 4 lanes of road now, but as the expansion said, adding 5, you create one as an HOV, high occupancy vehicle on it. So the most expensive thing about the road building business for the last 10 years is not the concrete, it's not the asphalt. Frankly, that's the cheapest part. It's actually cheaper than the design. It's the right of way, particularly in an urban environment. I mean, it's $8 million a mile for a 2-lane road in an urban area. That's a bargain. Utilities and right of way. So planning ahead for transit that way, taking those opportunities is really important. And I guess the last thing, because you mentioned it, I've talked to Jim Kubitz. Jim was gracious enough to come to to our transit advisory board and let them know that we were thinking about doing some type of a commuter rail service, and they asked him, how much is it gonna cost, who's gonna pay, how are we gonna get connected? And our transit board was interested in the concept. I won't say they were jumping up and down enthusiastic, because they were trying to figure out, okay, Lance, what service are you gonna take away to provide that connection? Unless you get some more resources. The other thing is, when we do our budget, we make decisions about the change we're gonna make in January, February. We have to go until June to implement. So Jim said, if we do this thing, we're not gonna tell you in September that we're running it in October. I said, you can't do that. If you're gonna start in September, you need to tell me in April.
And to that extent, that was the conversation that, and we were scheduled in June, but it was my miss not having Lance in April at our meeting. We started meeting, we met with the intent to have the subcommittee at the Matanuska Borough's meeting in winter, or spring. Then we followed up in March in Eagle River and set kind of this committee chairpersons and where do we go. We met again in early April with the intent to meet in June. You would have been in one of those, and I'm sorry you didn't make April because that was my miss. But the intent is, and I'm glad you brought the segue into the rail car. The intent is, at least conceptually, on the outset, is for this to be a 2 to 3 year pilot project. I thought that we would see if the funding would come from A, through some state funding, B, through some corporate sponsors, if you will, and obviously the smaller portion being revenue fair. But that said, we were conceptually looking at was, for instance, UAA runs its shuttle buses through its property locations, University Center Aviation, back and forth. I think Providence Hospital may have something, just about Johnson Tire, I saw the other day, has an 8 shuttle bus. So if you had some of these private businesses that were willing to bring their employees to and from those stops, that would mitigate some of the cost of trying to bring a new route there. Perhaps now with the advent of an Uber conceptually, I've been thinking this for decades, and that is, why can't we run, when I was in the Army, Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, sprawling much like Anchorage and around the bowl, and you had to share a cab, but they had those great big wide checker bodies, and it was 50 cents, and it didn't matter where you got on or where you got off. Every time you climbed in a cab, it was 50 cents. And you might be in there with 4 or 5 other people, you didn't know that you went half a mile, it was 50 cents. You went across the post, it was 50 cents. But it was like one of those things where they did the milk run, and then they fed you to the main line, and if you were gonna take a main road to go hither and yon, then you went on the direct route, boom, boom, rather than trying to snake big buses into neighborhoods that aren't necessarily gonna be developed, or as you say, want to acquire right-of-ways to change its layout and format to accommodate. And so I've long thought that there's a way, a different model that we could look at in feeding these, like you say, rapid corridors every 15-minute, 20-minute. You know, there's no wait roughly. It's just a matter of getting from point A to that feed point. And so there's a lot of things I think that are coming, as you say, they're exciting. But this train concept was strictly between Matsu and Anchorage, including J-Bear. And that was to alleviate, if you will, or to try to alleviate the need for this 5th lane, 6th lane, and perhaps the HOV lane is clearly an option. Because right now, if you've got a crash or a weather delay of any sort on the Glen Highway, the buses are stuck in the same traffic that the cars are. I mean, if there's an hour delay on the Glen Highway coming in, hey, the buses get stuck in it too, right? So vice versa, going back out. And so the train, the idea behind the train, twice a day, each direction, would be, I mean, unless there's a cow, moose or something that gets struck, or, I mean, even that, they just move on. They call it the meat patrol. But anyway, bottom line is the train doesn't, you know, it's a pretty consistent speed back and forth, and it was more for the experiment to see if that could alleviate some congestions. I believe Moki said under Valley Mover's model that he didn't think that for the record, I believe the first meeting or second, he said he didn't think that the train would have much of an impact on your business model. That he didn't think that would decrease your riderships, you know, in a significant amount.
I'm not sure about that.
Okay, I mean, he mentioned that anyway at Eagle River meeting. It talked about, he welcomed the idea of at least trying it to see if it would, you know, cause he said the same frustration, he's almost getting the max capacity. And it's kinda like a franchise, you know, there's a tipping point, you get to so many, add another bus, well, now you got the overhead, the hire the driver, to pay the fuel, the maintenance. You know, now you have to continue that ridership, as you were pointing out, revenues are down, or your grant runs are down, or whatever. So I think there's a whole lot of challenges that we're all seeing as it goes on, but, this commuter rail, if you will, through the railroad was an option that we were looking at, again, strictly just Matsu, Anchorage. And I don't know if we've talked about, I think there was a concept of perhaps stopping along the way in Eagle River, but I'm not sure. Birchwood, I'm
I
sorry.
think is what they were talking about, cause the train goes right through.
Cause I don't know if that's even a possibility, cause every time you stop, obviously you delay that route even, it's not as rapid anymore as even driving in the bus. So I appreciate, I guess I just need to go around the table, make sure we don't have anything further.
Yeah, so, lots of great discussion, and we need to have a lengthy workshop between the assemblies, Anchorage and Matsu to discuss this item plus additional. When it comes to the railroad, just that one item alone, the railroad's a little tentative because of funding and stuff. Some of their issue are with the lost revenues they had of bringing fuel products from Fairbanks down this way. Where on the other hand, we're reserved in negotiation for 2 gas projects and a fuel tank farm at Point McKenzie that keep the railroad busy and augment their revenues, which may help in the roundabout, fund some other opportunities on mass transit type of thing. It's kind of a holistic approach. And the discussion of our port is not in competition with your port, our industrial port. And I think as a whole, we need to have those meaningful discussions before we go to the legislature this year.
Oh, I totally agree.
And when it comes to transit, again, whether the rail car would compete with Valley Mover or another provider really depends on what the profile of knowing more about these users and where they're going. The rail might have an advantage of going through and on base, versus the Valley Mover has several opportunities, and they take all of our high school kids. We offer a middle college program where Valley kids can go to any high school, catch the bus, and come and they get dropped off in Eagle River at the middle college. That's provided through UAA at Eagle River rather than the Matsu. But there's several things that need to be discussed, and in closing, I would like for us to schedule a transportation and pre-legislative meeting and have this presentation in a longer conversation rather than a superficial handshake 2-hour meeting in Eagle River. Actually have some of these substantial discussions about transportation, port, and a few other items where we really need to understand our place and our leverage and work together that there's not enough funds to cover all of these desires. And so how do we prioritize those? I know on our side of the river, we, rather than launching a book of requests at our legislatures, we give them our top 5. And when it comes to transportation, what are our top joint handful, or 3? Otherwise it just kind of gets distracted, we never get anything done. Or we partially fund something that's so hobbled that it really doesn't, it's all eaten up in overhead. When it comes to the consolidation of these grant requests, I'm a little concerned. I can see where there might be some savings on administering the grant portion, and make sure that all the agencies are meeting those requirements. But geographically, they're so spread out, it's not like you can consolidate maintenance and other stuff when and maybe we jointly comment or get your support to comment, so that we can go back to the federal agency and ask for a waiver or some kind of consideration.
No, I thought this was a good discussion. I think from a committee standpoint, I think it's important, we have 2 members from the Valley and 2 members from Anchorage, and I don't want the Valley to feel like Anchorage is just taking over. It's important to me that this is a collaborative process, that we understand the needs of both communities and the deficits, to be quite frank, of each of our communities, the challenges people into Anchorage, how we disperse them in the most efficient fashion. And I think Steve's right, I think we need to recognize the whole picture, take a holistic view at it, and not segment that to Anchorage, because we really do, I mean, those people that are riding the buses in Anchorage are, a lot of them are Valley people, so, I think that's important. So I would just say, moving forward, I think one of the ways the committee, we might get different perspectives or different, ideas coming to the table. I would suggest that every other meeting, we alternate between the two co-chairs. So, like, we get to highlight what we're concerned about, and then next time the Valley gets to kind of lead the discussion. Yeah,
I was gonna segue into that.
yeah, I think that would be helpful. And I think Steve's right too. This is such a big topic, and there are so many facets. Whether we're talking about the port, whether we're talking about Anchorage, internal transport, or, you know, maybe stopping in Peters Creek, or how we're bringing some of these different entities to the table. I think it would be helpful just to kind of mix it up a little.
Well, I appreciate it, and that's from the co-chair, response, and I know, that essentially is the task, or the intent was, as a co-chair, be able to bounce back and forth as to who essentially, since that's the agenda, invites speakers for education, information, and that sort of thing. And I clearly understand and certainly support having a larger workshop discussion with, as, if you will, both bodies, committee as a whole. It's gonna be a challenge, because I know that, I know you likely, your body has meetings with other groups, but we meet jointly with the school district, school board, quarterly, I believe, and we meet, I guess, with your group, every 6 months. At least it's what we attempt to do, going both directions, at least since I've been on the body. And, this body, this committee, subcommittee was supposed to meet again. We were setting a meeting from April into June, because we knew summer was coming, that we had some, we took a little pressure off, knowing that we were gonna try to get on September, October with a rail train. In our April meeting, what we eased up a bit on the gas pedal was, not that we were gonna go this long, but, that we weren't gonna be as aggressive trying to solicit private, contributions, and trying to figure out if we can get legislative funding for the train for this time frame into the 2015 year. So, that said, one of the concepts, when I first came on the assembly, Anchorage side, we did have a meeting with the borough, and it was in Eagle River, and we had, presented, it was a regional transit plan possibility. And you guys you may not have been the director at the time, but the concept was that we look at things from a bigger level, I wanna say 40,000 foot, but anyway, a little larger level, to accommodate the concerns of growth, and how does this work out as far as funding goes? Can the regional transit authority, if you will, we'd have to be given a change of state law so that they would be able to either tax, or would the state allow us to fund through for instance, a nickel gas tank, gallon gas, or a penny or two, or whatever? Or does it get turned over to a nonprofit, and that being the umbrella of someone that's essentially a board, regional board, and there's a nonprofit that manages or administers all that. So there's a whole lot of discussion left on that, which we didn't even touch today. But these were things that we originally discussed. The reason for the subcommittee, if I recall, was that, and the fact that, the railroad did look at and mentioned in one of their presentations before their board, for a couple of reasons, not the least of which, of course, they have commitments with federal funding that necessitates them to accommodate a certain amount of passenger in the winter, passenger travel in the winter. So that was one of the reasons that I believe they were very interested. They're willing to do a lot. Unfortunately, their revenues were significantly impacted with the closure of Flood Hills and some other challenges that they're having from their passenger side revenue. So there's a whole lot of things going on, as you say, and a lot of things that are very exciting. Not the least of which, of course, are concerns among the people mover, or the Valley mover, and the conglomerate of what we know as Matsu Transit. So, I guess in closing, I'll say that Mr. Culligan, tagging you're it, so the next meeting will be yours to set. And I would ask, Mr. Wilbur, is there any way we could ask for, impose upon you, a representative of the people mover to be?
Absolutely, whenever.
Yeah,
I mean, if I'm not available, Christine or Rule, or
Sure.
somebody can be there to.
And we didn't hear from either of the other two here, or three. Is there anything that you guys might wanna add before we close? make it worth your while investing your time here rather than? Okay. Anything from Share a Ride?
No, we're full, we're getting
How
full.
many Share a Ride vans do we have
We have 65 coming in.
from the valley?
So that's 65 times 13, and we have 96% of our seats registered for. But we can do some, it's coming where we could do some real-time ride sharing and some cool technology things that WRIDE's developing, so.
The majority of those are the J Bear.
Yeah, 50% go to J Bear, and then the other 50% go into Anchorage. It really is 50/50. And you guys were talking a little bit about employer, involvement, and there is a lot of employer involvement.
Can you, briefly, can you tell me, do they give like a fee or a fund
Yep.
or a percentage?
That's exactly what happens is, private employers understand the importance of transportation, all public transportation, not just van pools, and they help their employees use what's available by giving them either A stipends, pre-tax withholdings, like a cafeteria plan, and I know that the state of Alaska is potentially looking at doing pre-tax withholdings.
University?
University gives us stipend, I believe, like a flat, like $30 or.
But that's for
Providence
everything,
and-
not just Share a Ride, right? That's
It's for anybody, for any sort of public transportation, and that's how they involve their employees to use all of these services.
Mr. Wheeler, is it UA students with a Wolf card, do they still get to ride with a swipe?
Right, it's for people mover and anchor rides. I'm not sure if they use on Vanpool. I don't think so. But it's basically the same technology we applied to East, which is so far
Pretty
really
successful.
well.
How about Valley Mover, do they use, college or military ID or anything for either
Yeah,
discount?
we have, the UAA does that, and then with Conifer Phillips, we have one too, to show their ID or their badge, either way, for the organizations we came up with them.
So, Ms. Eaton?
Paul, can I mention something, just because I do, you guys know that, I get on the bus and I come to town. And the one thing that is really good about the Valley Mover is that when I first started, because for some reason I work for these assembly people for a long time, and Lance knows that, I've been around and I usually ask when something is something that I deal with. And so what I started to do was, when I started to ride, was just ask the people, can I just do a little mini survey, since I'm sitting next to them on the bus, yeah, it's the morning, some of them are awake, some of them aren't. And then when I go home, a lot of them use that hour to get back to the valley, and, it's been a long day, they'll sleep, whatever. It's just that layback, and it is, everybody that you ask is, you cannot afford to drive a car to town for what you have to pay for a ticket. And a monthly pass fee, So anyway, the point is that when I was doing this little survey, because, after working with all these, assembly people for a long time, and trying to find the answers about how people really liked it, and everybody that I talked to, I don't remember one person that said, okay, if you were given this option of having the train, like you mentioned, and remember, we went to the train railroad people down there and did that little, question to them, and everybody goes, well, I should never say 100%, but I would say 95%, yeah, if we could get on a train, a transit, and then come to town, awesome. That's what they would do. And not because they don't love the bus, but they would just love to get on that train and not have to worry about the traffic, because, you ride the bus every day, sometimes there's traffic issues. But anyway, okay, so they get on that, support of having the transit, but then, we had to go through that whole, we were trying to get the train started, and then we have to deal with, going through bases and all of that problem is gonna happen. And then when you get to town, you're gonna be down at the railroad depot. And so, and I think you and I mentioned that a couple times about, okay, so they're gonna change it, they're gonna put people down there. Well, all these people that are down there, they gotta get up here. And now right now we have the railroad, the little van, courtesy van.
Shuttle.
Thank you. They bring them up to the bus stop, they work down there, and they pick them up and take them down. But, at any rate, I just had to, because I'm not one of these people who can just sit there and go after the meeting, yeah, well, I should have said this. I'm saying it because I'm somebody that gets on the bus every day, and I know, even though it's wonderful to have these services, And yes, it's great to listen to all this input, but I think when you actually are on the bus every day, and they are wonderful, believe me, the bus drivers are awesome. And when you're on there, you can actually say to people that are in the government, and thank you for the chance, just that I do this and I know what I'm talking about.
So if I understood too, just last little bit, you're doing that kind of survey with the onboarding right now?
Oh, yeah, in town.
In town, which is good.
And this is actually the first year that we're including whether a passenger is transferring from Valley Mover to People Mover. So we'll have more data about where Valley Mover customers are then going once they get to
Good,
Anchorage.
that'd be nice to know. That'd be very nice to know. Okay, it's 11:33, and we'll be